So we're going to talk a little bit about triple bottom line sustainability. We're going to do some literature values for you because it's really hard to price out green infrastructure. Cost calculators that are available, and then I'm going to do a case study that how we're selling green infrastructure to Clear River Watershed Council. Some of my best clients are basically watershed organizations. I've worked with a variety of watershed organizations around the state, done a lot of work with the Clear River Watershed Council. I'm on the board of directors for the Kalamazoo River Watershed Council. I've worked with Jen, who's been very generous to bring me up here a couple of times, and then I have also done some work with the Watershed Center at Little Traverse Bay. So I really enjoy working with watershed councils. So triple bottom line, right? So what we're looking at is an opportunity to be socially, environmentally, and economically sustainable, right? This is what we're talking about. So here's all of the stuff's in your book, so I'm not going to go through a ton, but kind of the first, this says low impact development because that's what they call it. One of the first reports that came out to try to look at the economics of this stuff came out of the USEPA in 2007. And they looked at 20 different case studies, and they only looked at capital cost. One of the things that's a knock on low impact development or green infrastructure is it's more expensive. Well, you have to look at the big picture. So this is not about life cycle cost. This is actually about the entire site, right? It's not pavement to pavement, but also the pipes, the lots, and everything else. They went through 20 different case studies, and what they found is there's typically a 15% to 80% reduction in capital costs for low impact development. And I'm just going to give you one of the 20 case studies at Somerset subdivision in Maryland. And so what they did is if they developed this whole thing using conventional development, it would be about $2.5 million. They did it in LID and it was about $1.7 million. So they saved themselves about $780,000, or about $4,000 per lot, right? And you can kind of, some of the high points right here, by doing it this way, they didn't have a stormwater pond, which means they could actually increase 6 additional lots. And so that was actually really a nice opportunity for them. So they actually had more lots to sell because they didn't have a traditional stormwater pond. They also didn't have as much costs associated with paving, and the construction costs were lower, and the pipe costs were lower because they had less concrete pipe. So by doing all this, they actually saved themselves quite a bit of money than the alternative curb and gutter design. One of the things, I don't think it's mentioned, it's not mentioned in this, so one of the things that was interesting about this is they had 2 subdivisions side by side, and so it's same schools, same access to the highway, everything was controlled for, and they were able to, this subdivision sold its lots faster and at a premium, because that's what people wanted. They wanted that lifestyle, that greener lifestyle, than the one right next door. So not only did the capital costs go down, they actually also made money because that's what people were looking for, at least in this particular area. So when they talk about the capital cost savings, the US EPA found that most of what I just talked about, less site preparation, less grading, less paving, less infrastructure, all of that. They did not talk about maintenance because this study was looking at capital costs. They did talk a little bit about, there might be higher maintenance costs early on to get things established, but after that it kind of evens itself out. ECT 4 years ago actually released a report called the market-based private financing of green infrastructure. Nate and I were alluding to that a little bit at the end of the last session. There are opportunities for bonding and private investment where they actually get their money back later on through, I'm not really good at all the financing side of this, but if you look at this report, they're actually making the argument of energy savings and other things that can pay for itself by going green. The reason I put this in here is they have a few tables in there that they mostly borrowed from the MMSD, which is Metropolitan Milwaukee Sewer District. And so this is the dollars, this is how much money it costs. This is what MMSD is reporting. So I'm going to skip, this is in your handout there. It's easy to get the report online, it's a free PDF. I'm going to skip to that because it helps you kind of see a little better. So remember I said you'll never do a green roof for stormwater? This is what it shows, right? This is cost per annual gallon captured. So you're talking about the gallon of stormwater you're capturing, right? On an annual basis. Green roofs are about 27 cents in Milwaukee per annual gallon captured, right? So the cheap ones are rain gardens are 4 cents, rain barrels are 3 cents. Just using native landscaping and like tilling your soil and soil amendments, 3 cents per gallon treated. So that's basically getting rid of turf grass and doing kind of more native landscaping, about 3 cents per annual gallon captured. So pavement's coming in around 10. So what's nice about this is this just kind of shows you, like normalizes for you, what costs more per gallon. So,
and I'm sorry to
that's all right.
contradict, but
no.
This is good for areas that you have more land, right? Like if you
No, this was actually downtown Milwaukee.
Was it?
Yeah, this was the city of Milwaukee.
Down, like they can infiltrate into the ground, like with those rain garden and stuff like that. Like where, like for instance, in like places out east, the bedrocks went like a foot down, and I was on projects where to put underground cisterns, it was way more expensive than to put a green roof on the roof and manage all the stormwater. So it is project type.
Well, there are no underground cisterns in this one.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, there's rain barrels, which is the homeowner, and cisterns, which is the larger water we use.
Right.
So, but yeah, these were projects in Milwaukee. So it's greater Milwaukee area. So it's a big footprint area. But this is a different study. So this was 4 years ago. This is a different study that came out of Milwaukee really recently. And what talks about property values, right? So we've been talking about, well, what does it cost per gallon to manage? Well, what this study looked at is, well, what effect does going green have on our property values? And so I'm gonna this again, all these are PDFs. If you really want to know, you can download it, you can read them, just Google it. What they found is that the property values adjacent to green space, and that could be a pocket park, it could be green infrastructure, it could be a corner lot, but anything that was green had about a 20% increase in property values compared to lots that weren't directly adjacent to green. Kind of makes sense, right? But they did say that they lumped it all together. So it could be it could be a park across the street, or it could be a rain garden or a pocket park, but anything green infrastructure related had a 20% increase in property values. If there were trees, just trees, it was 15%. So that would be like a street tree, or just a tree like in a yard. There was about a 15% increase in property values. Buildings with a vegetated roof versus non-building, and this was a really high-end economic study. They normalized for everything. You know, trust me, the variables and the models they ran, they had 11% increase for if you had a vegetated roof. That's just in property values. Okay. They really had a hard time quantifying specifically rain gardens, because most of the rain gardens that were going into economically depressed areas, and it was really tough to kind of sort out gentrification and schools, and basically they just couldn't make sense of the noise associated with rain gardens. But I will say they had 4 areas they concentrated in, and I thought a couple of these were interesting. Menominee Valley, basically they spent $800,000 in green infrastructure and found a return on investment in 3 years because of increased return on revenue on taxes. So the city got its money back in 3 years. The brewery was another area. They put in about $1 million in green infrastructure, and they calculated it to be about a 17-year, obviously this is calculations, but as the property values are going up, they figure they're going to get their money back in about 17 years in this one. The other 2 neighborhoods they had, they could not really find a discernible ROI on property revenues. It wasn't negative, it was they couldn't really rectify property values with green because of other factors that were beyond control of the study. So just kind of an interesting idea. NRDC put together this one, which is commercial. How does green infrastructure in commercial space work? I'll jump to it. What they looked at is they did what's called a total present value, but they had one of their case studies, a 40,000 square foot retail space, and they found that by doing green infrastructure on a retail center, they would they'd get about a $24 million benefit on a 40-year total present value. So what that means is, over the course of 40 years, the retail center would see a $24 million benefit by going green. However, a big chunk of that money was the assumption that that retail center was going to pay a stormwater utility. So this is for cities that you have to pay to have your stormwater treated by the municipality. But they did an apartment complex, and that apartment complex had about a $1.7 million return on investment. That had nothing to do with the stormwater utility. That had to do with increased rents, because people want to live in green developments, with rain gardens, with planter boxes. And then they did an office building, and that one returned about $1.9 million. One of the things with office buildings is if you actually look at some of the broader social issues associated with green space, people that work in green offices have higher attendance report higher job satisfaction, get sick less. So actually, it's really hard to quantify these things, but they've tried. They try to quantify that. Basically, workers are more productive, they're healthier, they don't miss as much time for work if they have an office space that you can see green out the window, that you're providing this kind of healthier environment. And my wife works for a very large insurance company, and she works in cubicle heck. And and I can see just going crazy when you see nothing but a cube the entire day, and there's no windows in our entire building. So they converted an old warehouse club, like a Sam's Club, into an office building, and those aren't even windows. I can see why people don't want to go to work there. So, I already talked about that. Sorry. Okay, energy savings. That's a big one. All right. So we kind of talked about these are really hard to quantify, and one of the things that we had a couple side discussions on, right, is I'm showing you kind of these big picture national studies. It's hard to get data local. Right? It's hard to figure out like what is the real benefit right here in Petoskey. It's going to be hard. Sometimes it's hard to quantify that. But these have been shown to be universal across different areas and different fronts. So this was cost of low impact development or green infrastructure. This is from 2013, and they looked at installation and 20-year operation across a variety of projects across the entire United States. And this is the installation and operation maintenance, infiltration practices, infiltration with porous pavers, cisterns that use irrigation, cistern with irrigation and gray water reuse, so pulling the water into the building, vegetated roofs, and bio-infiltration, so basically kind of rain gardens. So this would be like an infiltration trench. This has got the bio as part of it. And they broke it down into office, residential, mixed-use development, and big box realtor. So you can kind of see if you're a big box realtor, where you have a lot of land available to you, big parking lots, you get kind of this is dollar per square foot of imperviousness. So what this is saying is if I got the more impervious I have, the more green infrastructure I'm going to need, but then they normalized it. So big box realtors have a ton of space, parking lots, big roofs compared to residential. So, and this goes back to this is real data. But that's why I always say the problem with green roofs, vegetated roofs, it's energy savings. It's quality of life. There's so many other factors that go into vegetated roofs. You don't want to get hung up on these numbers, which is just because they are more expensive up front. There's so much better, life cycle is so much better on those. And then this is dollars per gallon of stormwater, right? So then this is, that's dollars per square foot treated. This is dollars per gallon of stormwater. So again, you can kind of see, infiltration-based practices that don't have plants are cheaper than infiltration-based practices that do have plants. Plants cost money. Plants need to be maintained, but they give you a better quality of life in many cases. So you have to kind of look at those other pieces of it, right? And you can see here, you've got cisterns, and then cisterns with gray water reuse, right? So a cistern is going to be cheaper. It's more expensive. You pull it into the building and then use it for gray water inside the building. If there's a bar missing, it's because they didn't have enough data that they could put a statistical amount to it. Like they weren't comfortable producing it based. That's why in some cases they didn't have enough big box cases where people were using gray water reuse. Okay, so that's why you see some of these that are missing in here. Urban mixed use, they didn't have enough where they were using it for irrigation. There are several cost calculators out there available. WRF has got a whole, their Excel spreadsheet you can download, and it's programmed with data from national databases, but you can also overwrite it for local as you become more, if you know what it's going to cost in your community, you can overwrite the spreadsheet. The US EPA's got National Stormwater Calculator. If you actually go and use that for planning, you can go into your community and you can plan, it's a planning tool for green infrastructure, and it'll tell you, it won't be like, I'm going to put a rain garden on this corner. It'll be like, if I have 20% of downtown Petoskey on rain gardens, here's how much water I'll keep out of the watershed, and here's how much it'll cost. So it's not like truly this corner, but the way the tool works is you pick, anyone familiar at all with the National Stormwater Calculator? It's a web-based tool, and you basically say where you want to be, like Petoskey, and it says, okay, if 20% of my town was covered with rain gardens, or 10% of my town was covered with green roofs, and then it kicks out numbers for you. So it's a planning tool. You probably used it, right?
Yeah, I've used it. And there's one that is based on that is greener specific.
Yeah.
Green save calculator. And it's important, like when I use these, I always go to each one. And you run it for each one. It might take some time, but maybe use the averages, because like there's different data sets that are available for different areas. Some have more accurate data sets than others.
So what we do for ours is, that's a really good point, Nate, is I use 3 different databases, and then I look at all of them when I'm doing my planning level estimates. And then when we go to construction, then you got to actually go out for bid and find out exactly what's going to cost you. So one of the things we did, so this was using low impact development economic tools for community support. So as I mentioned, we've been working with the Clinton River Watershed Council. It's in Southeast Michigan as part of their Water Counts program. And we do visioning, and then we also do, here's how much water you're going to keep out of the water, or out of the Clinton River, and how much it's going to cost, right? So I'll just give you a couple examples. So we went to the city of Clarkston, and so here's this is the Main Street parking lot, a green alley that we were recommending, kind of some bioretention. So what we did is we did green infrastructure visioning for the city. So we basically say, okay, here's your existing infrastructure. I look for stuff like this. Here's a corner of a paved parking lot. Nobody can park in it because of the way it's paved, and just that's a perfect opportunity for a rain garden. There's nobody can park there. Here they were literally mowing right into their mill pond. I watched the guys' wheels going into their mill pond, right? And you can see here there's erosion. So I look for opportunities. So what we do is we come in and say, hey, you got an opportunity here for a rain garden. You got an opportunity for porous pavers. You got an opportunity here to retrofit with bioswale. And here's how much it's going to cost. And then the dollar, that's the money, like $4,900 for that rain garden. The raindrop basically says how much water you're going to keep out of the Clinton River watershed compared to what was going in there before. So the raindrops is, here's how much water we're saving. So like this permeable pavers, I had a really high water table here, so I couldn't get a lot of infiltration, but by putting like grass pavers here, like I showed you from Holland, we're keeping about 25% of the water that used to go in the river out. So that's how that's what these raindrops represent. I won't go into a ton of detail because we're going to run out of time. But we try to tell the community, here's what the cost calculators tell you, and here's how much water that used to go straight into the river that's now going into the ground and getting captured and treated. So here's an alley. This was a great success story. Right here, all of these were direct connect pipes, which is bad. Like these were all direct connect pipes. So we came in and said, oh, plus there's parking at this end and a park at this end, so this alley was full of conflicts. People would walk down the middle of this alley with strollers, but it's also where the garbage trucks were coming and delivery trucks were coming. So there's a lot of human use conflict in here. So we kind of designed this system. The truck can still go through here. We got a dedicated parking lane. Some of the businesses agreed to give up some of their parking here so they could go green in this area. And then we still put access to the dumpsters. We just kind of tucked them in a little bit. So you can that's what we recommended. This was going to be a very expensive project, just a couple $100,000 project, but the DDA loved it. They just jumped right on it. It was something that they wanted. So we went through this process I only showed you a couple examples because we're running out of time, but we went through this process. We looked at 5 different sites. We tell them, here's how much water that ran off before based on a 2-year storm. So we're sizing these for that 2 inches of rain. Here's how much water is running off now. So it's about a 50% reduction. And about $2.42 per gallon. That's for the dollars per gallon treated. That's in perpetuity, right? So if you did an annual, that's one thing about those calculators. So this whole project came to be about $2.42 per gallon. So that is in line with, I'm going to show you a little nuance. That's in line with these numbers, right? The gallons per stormwater captured and treated. Okay, it might look screwy next to. Oh, where's the cents one? Sorry. I just remember this. That's why I wanted to go back, because I just remember this. So you might say, well, wait a second, that says 4 cents. Why is yours $2.42, right? That's because per annual gallon captured. If I take all my rain for an entire year, then my $2.42 becomes pennies. So that's the weird part. So it all depends on how it's reported.
And one thing, too, that, a lot of the incentive coming out of a lot of these older cities, and I don't know did you guys have a combined sewage here, or is it separate? Is it CSO here?
No, not CSO.
Okay. So like a lot of the treatment that he's talking about, the dollars that are being spent, is because stormwater is going into the same pipe as the sewage, and that goes to the sewage plant, and they're paying to clean stormwater. So that's where there's a CSO, there's a lot of incentive for the city to keep water out of that because they're just clean. They're putting that water through their system, and they'd rather keep it out of there. So that's one reason.
So what you'll find, the last slide I have on the economics, and then I've got a couple case studies, and Nate has a couple case studies, local case studies, is that how do you account for green infrastructure, right? What are you going for? And so when you see people kind of trying to account for it, sometimes you'll see volume of stormwater managed, right? How much water did I keep out of my system? Sometimes you'll see peak volume. So like that heavy part, they're not so worried maybe about the total volume, but they're really, really worried about that flashiness, that storm, that intense storm. So like Washington, D.C., for example, they are only concerned about peak. Like they need to make sure that they don't have a rush of water into their system. They'll get some volume as a side benefit, but they're not focused on volume. They want to make sure they keep that peak off. Sometimes you'll see it being reported as percent impervious cover managed. So what that means is this building right here, all the roof on this might be impervious cover. It is impervious cover. But if all the downspouts on this building went into a rain garden, then this is 100% managed because you're taking it and you're putting it on green space next to it. Sometimes you'll see it reported as per square foot of GI implemented. So I've got 10,000 square foot of GI. Well, the problem with that is if you have 10,000 square foot of GI, not all GI is created equal, right? I could have 10,000 square foot of plants, which is great, but I could have 10,000 square foot of plants over 3 foot of really wonderful soil, which is going to hold 4 times as much water. Green canopy is one that's coming up. That's like your street canopy. That's a big one. And then the other way, some people are just presenting dollars spent, right? So New York City is spending $1 billion on green infrastructure. Most of the people that are talking about dollars spent are in the CSO, the combined sewer neighborhoods. The other numbers are things you just see from different communities depending upon how they're trying to report. So that was the 25-minute kind of, or 20-minute whiplash on economics and benefits, things that we see in the literature. I said it's really tough to drill down for exactly what's going to be here in Petoskey, but I can tell you that it is playing out over and over again. There's a growing body of case studies and literature that this stuff does make economic sense. So before we launch into the local case studies, any questions about kind of the economics or some of the benefits that maybe we didn't touch on?
So I would imagine that these economics get better every year. Is that what you're seeing? I mean, because first of all, the projects that are using this are so minor. The number of projects out there that are using this becomes tiny compared to the rest of the gray infrastructure that's out there. So, I mean, are the trends positive?
What do you think? How do you want to answer that?
Yeah, because like the more it's sort of like keeping up with the Joneses type situation, like if I have a green roof and you're building next to me, you're going to do it, so it all starts to pile on. And I think that overall, my company, I'm out in Traverse City, and we've specialized in green infrastructure, and we're thriving. So like the industry's growing each year, and I think the cost is going down, and that's not only because of more opportunity and bigger jobs, but also the manufacturers are more mature, and their prices are going down because they have more volume as well. So there's like as the volume increases across the board in the marketplace, I'm able to deliver an installed price at a lower cost. But that, like a small little your dog house or something, that's still going to be more expensive per square foot because of mobilization stuff and all that. But economies of scale work into that too. But overall, I think that this is you're going to see stuff mature, not only the market but your infrastructure, and your costs are going to start to go down overall.
My job is to stand in front of these folks and tell them, this is what you should do on this project, and here are our comments, and that economics piece of it plays into it very heavily. It's very important.
I would tend to agree with Nate that overall the trends are positive, because you're getting more, like the first porous pavement job anybody does, they're going to charge you a ton because they don't know what they're doing, right? So they're worried, they're nervous. So overall, I would agree with Nate, as the industry is maturing and more contractors are capable of doing it, the prices are going to come down. The flip side of that is several of my green infrastructure projects I've done recently have come back extremely expensive, and that's because, not because it's green, it's because the contractors are so busy right now. I mean, right now the economy's booming, and people are building, and they're like, you know, they're kind of like, hey, let's make our money when it's good, right? I mean, I put out 2 projects recently, and both only had a single bid. It's like it wasn't even a competitive bid process because all the other contractors, they were so busy they didn't even want the work. And so that's not because it's green. That's just because the industry's booming right now. And I was just really disheartened that I could only get a single bid. Like, so then you don't, you know, so, but yeah, that has nothing to do with it being green. That just has to do with the fact the economy's doing great. So,
Thank you.
any other kind of economy, big picture stuff? I really hope this is helpful because, like I said, you got to look at the life cycle. You got to look at the whole footprint of the building. I mean, if you just look square foot to square foot, you're not really looking at the big picture. That's the biggest, hopefully, the takeaway. Look at life cycle costs. Look at the entire footprint. You know that you're. You know,
and then look at also the economic, the environmental, and the social benefits that are coming from all these technologies. There's dollars, like in particular, there's, you know, you can dive into many benefits from each of those 3 categories, and there's actually a paper that's out of Canada, out of Toronto, that for greeners specifically, that you can look at all the other types of benefits, like, you know, how much is it worth to have your employees be able to look out over a green roof versus a black tar roof? You know, like there's actual algorithms that have been put together by a PhD, and he studied all kinds of different things. So I could share that if anybody's interested.
we had, it was an infill development, green space infill development, and I'm trying to remember, I'm going to say 20 acres. I might get that wrong, but here it is in a nutshell. They had a series of condo complexes, so basically 4 units, kind of 4-unit townhomes. So you can picture in your head a single road going into a cul-de-sac, coming out the main road, and it's lined with townhouses, right? And the back side of the property was a detention pond, because all the water had to go somewhere, right? So they had a detention pond in the back. We met with the city and the developer to try to come up with a new solution, and instead of curb and gutting everything to the main road and go to a big pond in the back, we took all the water to the back, we put bioswales along the back side of the development, and we fed them into the pond at the end. But we didn't create a pond anymore. What we did is we created an infiltration basin. So instead of it being a deep pond, we captured half of the water in swales along the way with little check dams, so it would infiltrate into the ground. And then at the end, instead of having a big pond, we had a real shallow infiltration basin. The developer had 2 choices, okay? One was to put in another unit in the back, because he saved, that's the idea of like the footprint. He had, because he shrunk his pond in half, he could put another unit in the end. 2, he could keep the pond area the same, shallow it up, and make it dual purpose. So he basically put playground equipment there. And so unless it's pouring rain, the kids could use it. They could play soccer, they could hang out, because it wasn't going to be like 5-6 feet deep, right? It was going to be like a foot deep. So they had, and he decided to do that instead. So instead of putting another 4-block unit there, he made it a community amenity, dual use, and then he got his money back because A, he didn't have any pipes, he didn't have any catch basins pipes down the middle, and he was able to charge more for the units because they were selling them as part of a condo, because now there's a community amenity at the backside. And so he got more than his money back. And that's just the planner and the city and the, kind of getting that developer up front. Basically, the developer came through with his plans, and the city said, hey, let's talk. Let's see if we can work with this. And the developer was like, all right, let's listen. I'll listen to you. And they talked to the developer, and they got the developer to change his development at the planning level, and he made more money, so he was happy, right? It came down to economics, but he was happy. But it was the idea that at the planning level, they intercepted that plan. Instead of getting approved, they went back to him and said, hey, can we be smarter about how you're doing this? All right. So this is 100% courtesy of Sarah Uren. I did not work on this project, but it's a local case study from Sutton's Bay, and I'm going to show you 2 pretty quickly. So those of you who've been over there, they had a lot of stormwater issues. They didn't have any stormwater treatment at all, so they had big plumes of problems here. Broadway and Marina Grove Street outlet. This is a $1 million project funded by the US EPA as part of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. I'll just go through it really quickly, but you can see plumes of sediment and trash, beach closures from the stormwater that was coming out of the city. So what they decided was they went and they planned rain gardens all over the city. They planned large infiltration trenches after the rain gardens, right down before, and then it would overflow. So here they did a whole bunch of little retrofits. So AECOM did the planning and construction of this. So here's a little bump out retrofit. You notice this curve shape? That curve? That's because they plow, the snow plow. They didn't want to square it off or they'd crack it. So the snow plows kind of make their way slowly around it. You can see where they've cut out infrastructure. So, so here's one. You can see the before and after. So here's one that's hashed. This is what I look for. Here's one that's hashed. You can't park there anyway. You got a fire hydrant in the middle of the sidewalk. So they came in, they curb cut, they cut out the asphalt or the concrete, in this case both. Okay, and then they backfilled it and they put in, they left the fire hydrant there, but now the water goes through this before going into the catch basin. So, so same concept. Areas you can't park are great areas for little rain garden retrofits. Okay, just little rain garden reach. So these are.
The cool thing about this too is the community, different businesses and households have all adopted these for maintenance. So each one has a little name. So at the city, it's sort of something that they do, and I think that's a pretty cool add-on. The community involvement is a big part of this whole thing.
So, they had these infiltration. I'm going to just jump through this a little bit. So they installed about 3,600 square feet of infiltration trenches, about 3/4 of a mile. I'm not going to show you. They did a swirl concentrator. So basically, I'm not going into all the detail here, but basically this is what captures the trash and the sediment and the debris before it goes in the infiltration basin. So the water that gets into the infiltration basin is cleaner and doesn't clog up to infiltrate. So, and then it spreads itself out. So that's your stormwater separator. So the water comes in here, the floatables go to the top, the oils and greases go to the top, the grit and the things that are heavier fall to the bottom. Then it goes out into the infiltration trench. So after it's captured in the front, it goes through these long trenches. It's all full of stone, and then it kind of slowly seeps into the ground and slowly seeps into the bay after that. And then they did a couple little pocket wetlands in areas like this area here and this area here. They couldn't get those infiltration trenches in the system, so they also put in a couple pocket wetlands here. I'm just going to skip ahead. So now it's completely grown up. You can't. It's just cattails and a variety of other species. So that was like heavy, big duty infrastructure. Like I said, it was $1 million project. The other one I'm going to show you is one that we designed in Northport. And this one is under construction right now. So if I ever come back, I can show you the after pictures. So this is Village of Northport. And so, you guys, right? So not too far, because you got to do this. It's like 2.5 hour drive to get over there. I can get there in boat a lot faster. But we just did this project. So let me show you what this one is all about. So this is Naganamba Street. This whole street from this school down to the harbor has no stormwater infrastructure. The water just comes screaming down this hill and right into the bay. So anything that's with it, oil, grease, sediment, dirt, they sand their streets a lot there, so all that sediment just washes right on down. So that's what it looks like, right? So when we looked at it, we looked at a couple things. One is we looked at this is way more asphalt than you need. So what we ended up doing is the short version is we took all this parking, we moved it out, and then we did tree box filters and infiltration trenches where the cars are parked right now. So we basically did a road diet as an addition to a green infrastructure diet. I'm going to skip that. This is what they originally planned. They originally planned for pervious pavement and rain gardens down here. Well, after we won the job and did the design, I basically told them you can't do any of this because the water table is 18 inches below. So the water's got nowhere to go. So that we got rid of all this the tree box filters down here, all of this. We got rid of all that. We put all the green infrastructure up on the hill where the water now can infiltrate and get down into the sand. Right down by the water didn't work. Okay? So we pitched them on the idea of a complete street, right, where you're going to have street trees, you're going to have infiltration trenches, you're going to have underground storage, you're going to have pervious pavers, and you're going to have a beautiful, walkable downtown environment, right? So if you go back to the way the street looks now, really narrow concrete walks. This lady pushing her grocery cart across the road here. No street trees, no lighting, right? Anyone been in Northport? Beautiful little town, but the downtown has some things to be desired, and they knew it, right? So they knew they wanted a better environment. So we pitched the idea of a complete street to them, and that actually worked out very, very well. So what we did, our conceptual design, is we went in and we analyzed the drainage area, we analyzed how much water was going to come out of it, we did a conceptual cost estimate, here's how much we think it's going to cost. We figured out how much pollutant was going to be removed, because this was being funded through a GRI grant. We did talk to them a lot about maintenance. Like, we talked to their maintenance folks. What are you willing to do? What are you not willing to do? What works for your community? What doesn't work for your community? One of the things we heard loud and clear, and don't read too much into this, we heard one thing loud and clear. They said, we don't want to look like Sutton's Bay. I do not want any rain gardens. So there's not a single rain garden in this design, because the community said, we don't want rain gardens. Sutton's Bay loves their rain gardens. Every little community is different, right? So that was very interesting to us, because you were thinking, oh, hey, right down the road, you got all these rain gardens. They're like, no, we don't want that.
Milwaukee County is a very small spot.
So they did not want rain gardens, right? None, right? So that was the assessment of community acceptance. There was a small, vocal minority that wanted a rain garden, and so we helped them implement a small rain garden at the school. But the downtown, nope, they didn't want that. So we focused on 4 areas, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here is going to be porous pavers in front of City Hall. So water on this side gets caught in a catch basin, then goes underneath into an infiltration trench over here with porous pavers on top. We're going to do street trees and tree box filters. I showed you that picture where all of these are technically strung together underneath. So above it's all stone, but above you don't know they're tied together. That's that concept there. And then this was like a rendering we showed for, hey, here's what it could look like if you put in these street trees and these tree box filters. We came down here, street trees all the way up and down. So that's what the rendering's going to look like, right? And I can't show you the pictures because it's literally right now, if I showed you a picture, all you'd see is no road. It's all sand, it's all tore up. But what ended up, I will give you a couple highlights. There's light poles now. There is the street trees, the tree box filters. I already talked about how we narrowed this road way up, and that's a big time success. One of the things that got taken out, I'll just be full disclosure, is this porous pavers got taken out. The pave drain, we recommended pave drain. They took those out because of cost. From a water volume point of view, this is an underground infiltration trench. So they can store the same amount of water and get it into the ground, whether they caught it with a catch basin or whether they caught it with impermeable pavers. And they said, we don't, so they got rid of the pavers, which that was part of the judgment call.
I've been on it.
Yeah, they've been on it.
I'm the only bidder.
So they got rid of it. They got rid of the
My
pavers.
fault.
So, but
Sort of.
I was arguing that the pavers, the city liked the pavers because they thought it would be good to show people what it was a demonstration project. But at the end, they decided it was too expensive to.
Yeah.
Part of that's because they're in Northport. It's a lot of money to haul pavers all the way up to Northport.
The cost of material and it wasn't a huge job, so
Yeah,
economy of
1, 2,
scale.
3, 4, 5, 6 parking stalls. So basically 6 parking stalls of porous pavers, it wasn't worth it economically. So the trench is there, it's still going to capture and treat the same amount of water, but as an educational demonstration project, it fell off. But all the street trees are going in, and, I'm really excited, can't wait to show more pictures of it after it's built. So, but it's good right now. Going well.
Question?
I have a question. Can you, I know one concern is
Why don't you go and get yours up?
maximum slope for some of these projects,
Yep.
street projects.
Yep.
So I know that's consistently a concern, so what?
So that's a great question. So here's what we did a couple of things on this project to address that. So one is, you don't see it here, but underneath those street trees, remember I said it's a stone trench? Well, because the road's like this, we actually put in barriers in between them that are connected with a pipe. So basically each one of those trees acts like a little cell. So on the street looks like this, the system acts like a block, a block, a block. So the water levels out and infiltrates that way. I think maybe one of the things you're talking about. And then what else did we do on that one? That was the big one. We worked with underground infrastructure. because at the end of the day, all those were end up tree box filters and infiltration trenches, we just put in barriers along the way so that the water didn't go underground and just run right out. It's going down. The other thing we did on that one is the building side of all those street trees and tree box filters. Well, we obviously came away 8 feet or more from the buildings. We also put an impermeable barrier up against the building, so that the water would go down and not towards the basements, the Michigan basements. We mapped all of our projects so that the basement level is higher than the bottom of the infiltration trench on all of them, so that the water's infiltrating at a lower elevation than the basement. So we were really cautious with that part of it.
Don, what was the slope of that street?
It varied. The steepest part was 7-8%. I mean, that's why they sanded so much. The steepest part was where all those pavers were. And that's why inside we had to put all these check dams, kind of impermeable check dams to make sure the water didn't just go right to the bottom of it. Because they sand so much there, all of those treatments have big catch basin sumps at the front. And they, every winter in the spring, they got to go in and suck all that sand out because we don't want that sand ending up in the street trees. So that's why none of those, no place there does the water go straight into a street tree. It goes into a catch basin first to capture all the sand they're going to continue to use, and then spills into the trees.
What would be the maximum slope you would use for, let's say, a linear bioswale?
Oh geez, a couple percent.
Okay.
Otherwise you're just going to erode the crap out of the top of it. It's just going to blow right out of there.